In this video, we'll take an in-depth look at a real-world case here where we have a JavaScript chart that is based on a SQL database query. And in this case, the database is showing the breakdown of product sales by country from the sample Northwind database. So you can see here that we're looking right now at the top 10 product sales in Argentina. If we go now and switch, say, to Brazil, we can see that the chart is dynamically re-rendered. If we say we'd only like to see the top 5 products, those are the top 5 products that were sold in Brazil. If we were to go switch now to, say, Ireland, those are the top 5 products in Ireland. So basically what we have over here is a JavaScript chart that is based on dynamic SQL queries. So let's go now and take a look at what's going on behind the scenes. So first of all, let's go over here to our controls, and we can see here there's our JavaScript chart. And if we look at the JavaScript chart, it's actually a pretty simple chart over here. We started out selecting I believe one of these pies over here. So like here, for example, would be a basic pie chart. And we've basically said that the data in the pie is going to be based on data series. So if we go here and look at the data in the chart, we can see that the data here is based on a data series with a subseries called total, and that the labels and also the tooltips are based on the same data series but a different subseries product name. So if we go and take a look at the data series here, we can see that this component has a data series called series 1, and if we go preview the data, there's 3 subseries. We're not using the country subseries because basically the country subseries is going to have the same value for each item. But if we go look at, say, for example, product name, there are the product names for that country. And if we go look at total, here are the totals. So this is the data that's going to be plotted on the chart itself. So there you go. We have the data itself coming from the total subseries, and we have both the labels and the tooltips coming from the product names subseries. Then this particular chart happens to set the line width to 5, so that basically controls this line over here between the lines. You can see we've got tooltips going on over here, and we've set the stroke style to white, which means the color of this line over there is white. So but most of the work in this particular chart is not actually in the chart setup itself, but it's in the definition of these data series. So let's go now and take a look at how these data series were defined. So now we'll go over to the menu and we'll go to the data series editor, and you can see that we have a single data series here that has 3 subseries: country, product name, and total. And if we go here and we edit the data series, we can see that the data series itself is based not directly on a SQL query, but it's based on a custom data source, which means that there's going to be an XBasic function that gets called to return the data. So there's an XBasic function called getData that is going to return the appropriate data for these 3 data series. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video, where we take an in-depth look at this XBasic function that returns the data. So we're continuing now with the video looking at this in-depth example, and we now are looking at the XBasic function that returns the data for this data series. So let's go now and take a look at this XBasic function. So over here is our XBasic function called getData, and let's actually put a debug1 statement in this and then walk through the code as it executes. So let's go into preview now, and I'll just hit run, and then we'll see what happens when we change the country in the drop down. So we'll go here to Canada, and then you can see now that the XBasic function is invoked, and now we can step through this function line by line. So the first thing that we're going to do is to see whether there's a value in request.variables.country. So if we go here and say request.variables.v.r1.country, we can see that this is now Canada. So this is the value in the drop-down box that was set just before the chart was refreshed. So this basically says that we're trying to now get the data for Canada, and the value in the second drop down, this top there, is still set to 10. So we're going to be getting the top 10 records for Canada. So now we go continue stepping, and so now we're basically defining a SQL argument called what country, and we're setting the value of that argument to Canada. And then here is the SQL that we're going to actually execute. So we're going to get the top 10 records, and here's our SQL that's basically coming from the order details table joined with the product table, and then also joined with the orders table, and we're basically summing by we're summing the price times quantity, and we're filtering on having country equals and then the value of our clause. So this SQL statement is built, typically would be built in the SQL Genie in Alpha. It's quite a complex SQL statement, but if you build it in the SQL Builder, it's relatively straightforward to build the query. And then you can see that right now this is hard-coded to say 10 over here, but if the value in this drop-down has changed to something else, we're going to want to change it from 10 to something else. So we go over here and we parse the query using the Alpha Anywhere SQL parser, and then we set the first property to whatever value is 10, and then we regenerate the SQL. So now the generated SQL is going to have select first 10, but if this drop down here had say 5 in it, this would be select first 5. So now we go ahead, we turn on Portable SQL, we open our connection to the SQL database, we execute the SQL, then we check to see that there's data in the result set by checking flag.resultset.nextRow. If flag is positive, then we know that there's data, and we continue to basically loop through the result set, building up this text string over here. So you can see here that the text string now has Canada, the name of the product, and then the total. Then as we go through the loop now the second time, now we basically have 2 rows in the text string, and as we continue to go through this data over here, we're fetching the data from the result set, building up this value text, and now basically text has this value over here. So let's just copy this to the clipboard so we can examine it in more detail. Go ahead and run this now. So if we go now to say a text editor and just examine that data, we can see that what we have is 10 rows of data, and this is the first column over here is the first data series, which we don't care about. The second column over here is the second data series. This is the data series that has all of the product names in it, and then the third data series over here is the totals. So this is what we care about. This is the value that we're going to be plotting in the pie chart, and these values here look funny because we are not looking at the data in UTF-8 format, we're looking at it in ACP format, but that doesn't matter because the chart itself is going to reflect the data correctly. So what we've shown in this video is how the data in the chart is based on dynamic SQL queries, and the last thing we want to show as we pick it up in the next video is how we actually cause the chart to refresh automatically on a callback. So the final piece of this component that we need to understand is what causes the chart to refresh when we go ahead and make a change in this drop down box or this drop down box over here. So we go back now to design mode, and let's go now to this drop down box country. So this drop down box itself is populated by doing a query of all of the countries in the Northwind customer table. But if we look over here at the on change event, we can see that the on change event is basically doing a JS chart refresh on chart number 1. There actually is no chart number 2 at this moment, so that's irrelevant. But so whenever we make a change to the country, we're automatically going to go and refresh chart number 1. So if we go now and look at this, the second drop down, this is basically the choices for this drop down are just going to basically be the number of products that we would like to see. So that's just a static list of choices. But again, we're basically doing the JS chart refresh data. So in this case, we are just refreshing a single chart here, chart number 1. But you can see that we've got over here a slightly more complex example. And in this example, there are actually 2 charts that are both going to be refreshed when we make a change to the drop down. So here's our first chart, and then the second chart is sort of very similar to this first chart, excepting that this is a donut chart with animation. So if we go there and change this to say 5, we can see that both charts refresh, but this bottom chart is refreshing with animation. So what we've shown in this series of videos is a real-world example showing a pie chart based on a complex SQL query that is generating the data for the chart. Thanks very much for watching.